While working at the theme parks, I got to see and experience all sorts of amazing things. But for me personally, there are 7 moments that just stand out as among the absolute best I had. I had such an awesome time working at Busch Gardens and Walt Disney World and Silver Dollar City, and I got to see and experience and be a part of so many amazing, life-changing things. But for me personally, there are 7 moments that really stand out as especially memorable, as especially cool and neat for me. A couple of these I've mentioned in other videos. A couple of these I've never really talked about. But these are probably my top 7 moments while working at the theme parks. Number 1, New Year's Eve at Toontown at Magic Kingdom. This was actually the first time I had ever worked New Year's Eve at the parks. I'd worked Christmas Eve and a couple of the other holidays that I expected, but New Year's Eve is a little bit different. The parks are overwhelmingly crowded to the point where they actually generally close Magic Kingdom and Hollywood Studios at like noon. Busy, busy, busy. I was blessed to be able to be stationed over in Toontown, which meant I at least got to stay inside in air conditioning for the most part all day, and I didn't get to see and experience the huge crowds. We just had our steady line that we dealt with. Once it got late at night, it was about 11:15, 11:30, and we noticed that the lines were definitely shrinking. Normally we would allow like 20 people into the room at a time, and instead we were getting groups of like 10, 15, 8. And those numbers just kept shrinking and shrinking until finally at about 11:45, we weren't getting any more guests in. It's because they were all outside getting ready to wait for the midnight fireworks and to kick off New Year's Eve. And we actually ended up with just nobody there and standing around goofing off and messing around with the characters. And at that point we realized, okay, it's almost midnight. They're going to start shooting off fireworks. Hey, can we, get out? And our managers all came in and said, hey, we're just going to be closed for the next 30, 40 minutes because there's nobody here anyways. Go stand out in the back and watch fireworks. And so my very first New Year's Eve at Disney, we actually stood out behind Toontown, behind the tents, standing there with other photographers and other characters, watching the fireworks at midnight as New Year's came in, with all the oohs and the ahs, and watching the princesses and the mice and the ducks and everybody else all out there together, just having a great time welcoming in the New Year's. That was a really cool moment, and an especially memorable New Year's. Number 2, New Year's over at Hollywood Studios. Now this was the 3rd time I got to work New Year's Eve. This time I was kind of roaming around the park, stationed with a couple characters, and then on Hollywood Boulevard, and we got to a point where about 10:30 or so, Hollywood Boulevard, the main path into the park, was just so crowded because everybody was coming in to stay there for the fireworks and to welcome in the New Year's. It got so crowded and so bad, we had to pull the photographers off the streets because it was actually just too dangerous. So we all ended up over in the View cover story at that time on Hollywood Boulevard, and we just basically sat in there for like 45 minutes going, yay, there's nobody here. They actually had a couple bands playing up where the Hat was at the time, in front of the Chinese theater, including Mulch, Sweat, and Shears. They had a couple DJs. And so what we started doing, because we had like 7 or 8 of us all in the View not doing anything, was a group of us would actually go out onto the street in front of the store, and we would enjoy the music and dance along and sing and everything, while 1 or 2 stayed into the shop, and we'd kind of rotate in and out. Come midnight, we're all standing out. At that point, there's nobody in the shop, so why keep anybody there? So we all stood right outside the store where we could look backwards and see if there was somebody that came in. And we got to welcome in New Year's with thousands of other guests while the bands and the DJs are playing. And normally for New Year's, I don't go out to events like that. I'm kind of a homebody. So it was a neat experience to be able to welcome in the New Year's in a way I normally never would, with thousands of people, with friends and co-workers with me, enjoying the live music and the fireworks, and it was a really cool New Year's. And especially to know that I was getting paid to do it. Yeah, that was alright. Number 3, an odd shooting assignment. When I was stationed over at Hollywood Studios, we would get some unusual photo requests sometimes. Our offices were there, and so if the Disney bigwigs or somebody wanted to try something new, it would come through the PhotoPass offices, which were at Hollywood Studios, and then the photographers that were there were the ones that got to experiment with this. When we first started doing water parks, for example, it was mostly Hollywood Studios photographers, with a few from Magic Kingdom, that got to go and play in the water parks for the cameras and try out the settings and the places and all of that. It was also Hollywood Studios photographers that helped with QA at the time, that if they need help, we were the ones that got pulled off. Well, in this case, we had a little bit of a different request. It turns out that the Vice President of Magic Kingdom, Phil, who you can actually see a picture of in one of the shops at Magic Kingdom, one of his friends and one of the gentlemen who worked under him had actually just gotten engaged. And they wanted to do a congratulatory celebration dinner over at the Brown Derby, which is at Hollywood Studios. And because it was a special moment, they wanted PhotoPass to come in and shoot it, so that way they could make sure everybody got copies of the pictures. And I happened to be the photographer that they pulled. Hey, can you come in with us and do this? Sure! So a manager and I, we all headed over to the Brown Derby at the appointed time. We had been kind of given a little guideline of what they wanted, and I basically got to stand in the corner as pretty much every vice president at Walt Disney World, along with several of the other high managers, all sat in this big private room at this big table, and I got to take pictures of them giving each other a toast, congratulating the person. So probably about 20 minutes where I basically stood in the corner, stood out of the way, and tried to get pictures of the moment. That was really kind of a cool moment. First time I'd been around a couple of those vice presidents. Only time I got to go around a couple of those guys. But just to be able to be part of something that many people wouldn't even know about, and to know that it's my pictures that they've got on their walls and that they're keeping for posterity. That's kind of a cool little feeling. Number 4, shutting down Toontown for Make-A-Wish. This may actually be my favorite memory, and I've mentioned this memory in a couple spots. The time that we closed down Toontown because we had a really sick girl from Make-A-Wish come in. We closed down all 3 rooms, brought all the characters together, and just to be able to stand alongside and watch. And rather than retell the whole story, I'm just going to provide a link to you right up there. Click that or look in the description and you'll get to see that special story. Still one that makes me cry today. Oh my goodness. So yeah, get your tissues ready if you go watch it. Number 5, answered prayer at Silver Dollar City. This honestly may be the moment that kind of touched me and blew me away the most at Silver Dollar City. At Silver Dollar City, I was allowed to show my faith as a Christian a little bit more. And one of the things that I would do on the train conducting is I would close the train ride with a short little blessing that I would say over the PA system. Just may the Lord above bless you and yours in great abundance. Very simple, non-offensive, generic, but at the same time I sincerely meant it. Because the park generally has a Christian emphasis in its leadership, that was okay. I had one time we had finished the train ride and said my little prayer, and as I'm getting off the train, this lady from the front starts heading back towards the back. Usually that wasn't a good sign. It means they were mad about something. And she's coming back and, who said that prayer? I did? Thank you so much. You have no idea what that meant to me. Long story short, turns out that they had planned this huge family vacation for her and her kids and her husband and everybody to come together and enjoy a few days in Branson at Silver Dollar City. Well, her husband was diagnosed with cancer. Bad cancer, stage 4, 5. He was not doing well. And so on this day at Silver Dollar City that they had planned everybody to come, he was too sick to come. She was basically just saying, would you please pray for him? And this is one thing I loved about Silver Dollar City is that as long as it didn't interfere with our job, we had the freedom to be able to do that. So I said, sure, wait outside the exit gate, give me a couple minutes to get this train loaded up and out, and got her whole family together and was able to gather them together and just pray for comfort and peace, and that he would be touched, they would have a great vacation, and that, prayed for healing as well. I had the next couple days off, so I didn't get to see them. Got a letter, actually, from my management that she had sent into the park. Basically saying, thank you so much. Thank you to this gentleman for praying for us. What he doesn't realize is that after he prayed, when we got back to our hotel room that evening, my husband was feeling better and was actually able to go out to Silver Dollar City the next day and join us. Just how they had this fantastic trip. And then after they got home, he rapidly declined and died a few months later. But how that was such a standout memory for them. And it was kind of like, oh my goodness. One of those times like, thank you that I was able to be used to be able to bless them and to see an answer. A very cool, neat moment that I'm blessed to be able to say that, wow, I got to be part of that. That was amazing. Number 6. my very last driving ride on Rhino Rally. I had quit Busch Gardens because they had changed hours and part-time workers now had to work 2 or 3 days a week and I could only work one, so I knew I was having to quit. We were looking at moving over towards Orlando anyway, so my last day at Rhino Rally, I'm having fun. I'm just goofing off and playing around. My main job at the time was I was a computer and technology teacher at an elementary school in Tampa. And between the teaching and Busch Gardens, I was working a lot. Busch Gardens was meant to be the break, and it kind of was, but it was still a lot of work. In any case, on this last day, I'm having fun, and lo and behold, as I'm getting ready to load up my very last truckload of people, this family gets into the back row of the Land Rover from my school. And actually, one of the kids that I knew pretty well was sitting in the back row. My poor navigator, he had fun, but he kind of got ignored because that whole last ride, I was totally teasing my student in the back row with her family laughing hysterically and her yelling, "Mr. Burnish, stop!" We had a great time, and it made for a wonderfully memorable last trip on Rhino Rally. One that definitely stands out as one of my most fun rides ever because I got to have somebody I knew to tease. And number 7, my first time at Mickey's Not So Scary. The first time I ever got to Mickey's Not So Scary, I actually worked at it as a PhotoPass photographer. It was actually one of the very first parties that PhotoPass shot. We were actually out experimenting a lot. We knew a few pictures that we were doing, including the ghost carriage at Haunted Mansion, and of course down on Main Street and other places. But we also had a lot of other places that we were kind of experimenting. For example, the stocks over at Liberty Square, and I was bouncing between shooting the castle in Liberty Square and the stocks. And we were kind of moving around, trying some different things, seeing what was going to work. Well, as the time for the parade began to come close, we couldn't shoot pictures of the crowd because it was too dark. And so my manager started pulling us off the areas to get us out of the way of the crowds. We actually ended up standing right by those stocks. There was me and the manager and probably about 4 other photographers. We couldn't shoot anything, so it's like, well, we'll just wait here. We could go down into the utilidors if you want, or we could be here. I'm good with being here. And so the very first time I'm at Not So Scary, the very first time I see the parade is actually with a group of other photographers and one of my managers. And at the time, the Headless Horseman, when he came, he ran. He didn't do the slow trot that he does now. He charged. And you could just see the energy from the crowd, almost like the wave coming through. And as he's charging by, of course, all of us photographers were yelling and screaming like goofballs. And then during the parade, we're yelling at the characters and waving and dancing. And yeah, cast members together, we can be a bunch of goobers. We had such a ball. My very first time seeing this with, again, a bunch of my friends and getting paid to do it. I got paid more often at Disney to play and have fun, and it was the coolest thing. It was really at that point that Not So Scary became my favorite event at Disney because it was just so much fun. And every time I've been able to be at it, whether working or visiting with family, it's been just as much fun. So that's a short list of my 7 favorite moments working at the theme parks. Do you have a great moment you'd like to share? Please do in the comments below. I would love to hear it. Thank you so much for watching, for checking the description. There's all sorts of information about fan websites, how to contact me, gear that I use, and so much more. So be sure to check the description below. Also be sure to check it if you want information about Patreon and my YouTube memberships. My members and patrons help support me. They help provide gear, help pay for travel, and so much more. If you want to know more about that, check the links in the description. Thank you so much for subscribing, for hitting the like button, for sharing, and for watching. God bless. Number 1, New Year's Eve at I was blessed to be able to stay. I can't talk today. What? Itchy. Number 6. Do you have a great moment? I would love to hear it in the stories. Ooh. If you'd like to know about my merchandise, fan pages, and more, be sure to check the description below. If you'd like to know whenever I've got a new video posted, well, make sure you hit that button right up there and subscribe. If you'd like to watch another one of my videos, I've got a great one for you right here. And if you'd like to be like these wonderful people here and support me financially on Patreon, well, make sure you check the link right there. There's even some extra perks for them. Thank you so much, and God bless.